Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Sean Scanlon makes our state tick. He's the state comptroller, C-O-M-P, comptroller. He's our top fiscal officer of the state, and he's here to fill us in of how the state legislative session went and what he's up to for the moving forward. Welcome back, Sean. Thanks for coming in.
Good to be back.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. And after this show, you're going to eat a hamburger at Louis' lunch.
I am. It's National Hamburger Day.
Uh-huh.
And
So-
this is the home of the hamburger. Home of pizza, home of the hamburger. Like, we got all the cuisine here.
Are they round at Louis' lunch or is they square?
They're kind of like, they take amorphous shapes.
Because my theory is they claim they invented everything round and flat in New Haven.
Yeah.
You got pizzas, you got hamburgers, you got Frisbees. They didn't invent clocks, but it was a big deal.
Yeah.
There was something else.
They thought the earth was flat for a while.
Right,
and round. Yeah.
How old were you when you had your first Louis?
That's a good question. You know, my grandfather, as you know, was a New Haven firefighter and a diehard New Haven guy. So I'm going to guess early.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know.
And do you remember the thing having to have it without ketchup?
Well, that's the thing is, like, my friends and people who work in my office know I love ketchup. And when I told my wife I was going to Louis' lunch today, she was like, how are you going to be able to do that? Because you can't have ketchup. And I am obsessed with ketchup. But when in Rome, you gotta go with it.
Isn't that an interesting marketing tool they had with that? That, you know, usually you don't prevent people from having the thing that 95% of them want, but kind of gives it this aura like you're going to have to come to Louis and have it Louis' way.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate swag, right? If you say you can't do the thing that you normally do because my thing is it's got to be this way, then you know you've got some cachet.
Well, I hope you enjoy the hamburger.
Yeah,
anyway.
thank you.
But you've also just finished up a legislative session. It's a short session, so not as much gets done on the even number year. How was the session? Did you feel in terms of your fiscal agenda much got through?
Yeah, you know, it's weird for me to go from having been in the legislature to being in this job because it's sort of an interesting prism to see how it works. And, you know, it's a little bit different to kind of get stuff done when you're an outsider, even though I'm still very much, you know, known to people there, but you're no longer in the legislature. So it's not as easy to sort of walk over to someone else's desk and say, hey, can you be for this? You got to kind of come in and out. But we got a lot of the things that we want to do done. We got more pension reform done on the municipal pension that I worked on last year that we talked about last time I was in. We did this big reform in 2023 that will completely change the way that we do municipal pensions in this state. New Haven is not part of it, but 107 of the 169 towns are a part of this pension system. We reformed it last year, kept that going this year, did a couple of other things on healthcare that we're really proud of to kind of move that agenda. And by and large, I think it was a pretty good session.
And it's interesting to me when you have a job like comptroller, I mean, beginning with Billy Curry, I mean, people have the job and they're ambitious about it, figure out ways to advance issues they care about through a fiscal prism. So how does the healthcare thing work? What were you able to do with healthcare?
Well, listen, I mean, for me, people don't think about this because they say, oh, you're the chief financial officer. What do you have to do with healthcare? I actually run the largest health plan in Connecticut. So 250,000 people get their health insurance through our office. And I try to use the scale and leverage that I have to then make healthcare more affordable. I started this thing called the Comptroller's Healthcare Cabinet last year in 2023. We got the best and brightest, smartest people from healthcare CEOs to hospital leadership to doctors to advocates, people like Luis Luna, who's a New Haven guy, you know, a guy who's wanting to advance the cause of, you know, healthcare.
He's trying to get healthcare for undocumented.
Yeah, like he's been involved, right? So everybody in the healthcare space, we brought them all together. We split them up in these different subcommittees, and we said, let's try to put together a laundry list of all the things that we can do in Connecticut to make healthcare more accessible and affordable.
And is he in a room with someone from Aetna or something?
Yeah. That's the beauty of this cabinet is like we literally put people together from all different walks of life, all different levels of responsibility, all different positions of power, whether it's power on the street in terms of organizing or power running a hospital system.
And what happens when they get together?
They get together and they try to find common ground on ideas, and they put together a report that had about 30 recommendations in it. We had about a third of those, 10 to 12, that got actually introduced this year as bills, and we ended up passing 3 into law this year.
Now, was one of them the fingerprinting for healthcare workers?
It was, yeah.
And that's fast. So the idea is that when you have openings in healthcare and they're not being filled, people don't get as good healthcare as prompt. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's exactly the idea.
So this gets them hired sooner.
Yeah, I mean, and that was one of the cool things that we had. The workforce subcommittee that we had was co-chaired. Each committee had 2 co-chairs, one woman, one man. that that working group was co-chaired by the Hospital Association and the largest nurses union, people who often fight one another. But these two chairs did an amazing job of getting together, and they said, hey, this is something we could agree on. We should make it faster for people to get to work. We need nurses. There's a nursing shortage in Connecticut. What can we do? Boom, here's an idea. We introduced it, and it passed and became law this year.
What was the deal with fingerprinting? Is that really tied up?
What was the old system?
Yeah, what had to change?
My understanding is it just took time, and time sometimes is a problem when you have to get more people trained up, more people into the workforce, more people sitting in these wards and helping people. And if we can make it easier, it's not going to... None of these ideas were, things that are immediately going to change healthcare, but cumulatively, I've always believed if we keep chipping away at problems, we can make it better.
And what were some of the other ideas that advanced the legislature?
Well, of course, the big one we just talked about is just more healthcare for people. I've always been somebody that believes we need more options for health insurance, and we've seen that become more and more of a problem. I supported a public option for health insurance in Connecticut for a long time, just because I think we need more competition. So things like that, raising Medicaid rates is something that almost every one of the subcommittees agreed on.
Rates of reimbursement for the hospitals and the doctors?
Yeah, because these rates have not changed since the early 2000s. So we're going on 20 plus years that these docs and hospitals have been getting paid the same thing to care for our most vulnerable people. And I believe in Medicaid. I think that we need to do more to make Medicaid better. And one of the ways...
So did that pass?
No, it didn't pass because it cost about $400 million. And this session, they decided to not really pass a budget. But going forward, we can't keep ignoring these Medicaid rates. I think it's the single most important thing that we can do for healthcare in Connecticut is to raise those rates.
So it's been 20 years since it's been raised.
Yeah.
And we've heard for the longest time from the hospitals that say Yale New Haven, they say when we have a lot of people on Medicaid, we lose money.
Yeah.
It's not about making a profit. We lose money when we serve them, and that we have to have other patients make up the difference. How bad has the problem gotten with 20 years? How much are people under? The
problem is terrible. They're getting about 45 cents on the dollar for every dollar that they spend to care for a person. And hospitals in Connecticut, Yale, Hartford, they're all the same. Their payer mix, meaning where they get their money from, they're getting a significant portion, most of the time over half, from either Medicaid or Medicare. Medicare is a little bit better in terms of what they give to hospitals.
Is that because the political constituency isn't poor people necessarily?
It's not just poor people, but again, when your payer mix is half government and the government is giving you less than it costs to care for that person, you've got to make that up somewhere. Well, how do they make it up? They make it up by charging a lot to the people who have private insurance. And so if we can make it more affordable for the people to care for people who are the most vulnerable, and the big percentage of the case that the people that they pay for and they care for, we can make this better, and we can lower the cost of healthcare for everybody. And I think that's important for us to do.
What year was the last time the rates were raised?
2003.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what did you say? You talked about how you used to be in the legislature, you used to be able to walk to someone's desk. And how did you deal with this one? Do you remember any conversations you had with a former colleague?
Well, this particular issue, everybody understands it. I don't know anybody that I've met so far that cares about healthcare policy, Democrat, Republican, who's like, no, we shouldn't raise the rates. Everybody knows we should do it. It's a question of finding the money. And I think that that's something that we're having a lot of trouble with right now in Connecticut, which is that we do have money. Our finances, for the first time in a long time, are really good in Connecticut. And there is this sort of head scratching happening where people are saying, wait a minute, you're telling me that we've got a full rainy day fund. We've had 7 years of budget surpluses. We've got good things going on, but yet we don't have the money to do things. And that gets into the complicated world that we're living in right now with the fiscal guardrails, where I am working right now with some of my former colleagues in the legislature and with leaders like Governor Lamont to sort of say, hey, should we look at maybe adapting these guardrails to make them more workable for the next, decade of Connecticut.
I want to explain that to our listeners for a second. You're listening to Sean Scanlon, the state comptroller here on Dateline New Haven and WNHH FM. So fiscal guardrails means we had a bipartisan agreement years ago that we were going to make sure that when we have good years, when a lot of money comes in, and we had a lot of money come in through COVID, we're not just going to spend it all so we have a crisis the next year. So we put in guardrails like the governor has to say, we have a fiscal emergency, or 60% of both houses have to vote before you can spend more than a certain amount of how much revenue you spent the year before. Now the progressive wing of the party tended to say that's we made up those rules on the fly. We should be able to be more flexible with them for higher ed, social services, and healthcare. The governor said that, in fact, if we're fiscally conservative, we have more money in the long run to address those same issues. And you did come out saying we shouldn't just ditch the fiscal guardrails, correct? You were
correct.
You were not just agreeing with your progressive colleagues that you should reopen it.
Yeah, because here's the thing. They're both right. The governor is right that the fiscal guardrails have literally changed Connecticut. And I think that they are doing incredible things for us. Just think about this stats. 10 years ago, Connecticut was in a permanent fiscal crisis. Today, we've had 7 consecutive years of balanced budgets and surpluses. We have
partly because we paid down some patient debt, is that correct? And partly because we had a lot of COVID money.
Well, no, not because of COVID money. So this is the biggest myth on the right? Everyone says, oh my God, all that fiscal progress is because of COVID money. We got $2.8 billion from the federal government, okay? We have $3 billion in our rainy day fund, and we've paid off $8 billion of pension debt. We've also given out huge tax increases and spent more money. 2.8 doesn't translate to all those things. All those things are
even
happening.
The Wall Street Journal editorial page does credit you guys for good fiscal management.
Yes, and so we've found a good balance. We have sort of righted the wrongs from the past. But my friends on the progressive side are also right that there are needs out there right now. And there are needs that are not able to be met because of the system of the guardrails. And I think they are working better than anyone ever thought they would. But people who designed them in 2017 were sitting there trying to balance a terrible fiscal problem where Connecticut had no economic growth. They had no migration into the state. We had terrible boom and bust budgets. They could never have imagined the world that we're in 2024. And so I think it's something that I've spent a lot of time on as the fiscal watchdog, of saying nobody is saying we should scrap the guardrails. They're doing incredible work. We got to keep going with them. But are we capturing too much money in something called the volatility cap, which is basically taking all the money we get from Wall Street and saying it can only be used on the rainy day fund and to pay down our pension debt?
Money from Wall Street meaning on our investments?
No. People who live in Connecticut but work in New York, they pay their taxes quarterly. You and I pay them once a year. Every quarter, that number that they pay changes based on what's happening with the volatile stock market.
Right.
And that's what was screwing our budgets in the past, because we would think the budget was balanced, and then 3 months later, those guys paid their taxes and we're screwed.
Stephen Cohen buys the Mets or something happens with one stock, and then we're screwed. So
what volatility cap does, it's the most important fiscal guardrail in terms of what's actually happened, is it says we take all that money and it cannot be used for anything but bolstering our rainy day fund, which is now full and has been, or paying down that pension debt. $10 billion has been collected by that one cap alone since 2018. And my question is, and the question that I plan to sort of ask people with this, proposal that I'm going to come out with in a little bit is, can we still take even 90% of what we're capturing on the volatility cap, and with that other 10%, still pay down our debt, still save for rainy days, but also free up the money to meet the needs of the public? And I think we can.
And is there enough money there to address what you want to do with Medicare rates and the many other needs from affordable housing to teachers' pay to nurses that...
Well, I think, listen, we have to accept that there's never enough money for all the things we want to do as progressives, as Democrats. That's a hard reality to meet, and I struggle with that as somebody who's idealistic and wants to solve problems, but it's a reality that we have to face. One thing I can tell you, though, is with the changes that we've made with the fiscal guardrails, we saved $650 million just this fiscal year by paying down that pension debt. And so when I first got elected to the legislature in 2015, I had all these new ideas and all these things I wanted to spend money on, and everyone laughed at me and said, we don't have money to do anything. Well, that's because our debt obligations were crowding out our social services.
And they are still, right? We still have high debt.
Yeah, but we've paid down $8 billion of the 40.
I know there's been a lot of progress.
So with 10 more years of taking our medicine and paying off that debt, we will have cleared half the debt that we owe, and that millstone won't be around my kids' necks. So I don't think either of my kids are going into politics, but if they do, or the next generation of their people, they won't be able to be handcuffed by our debt, and they'll be able to use that money to do all the social programs that we want to do, to find solutions to homelessness, healthcare, poverty, all those things, because 75% of our budget right now goes to debt service and a few other things. It's lacked.
So you're going to propose that we keep the guardrails in place, but we take 10% of the money that's captured under the volatility cap?
Definitely not holding myself to 10%. That's just an example I'm giving you. But what I am going to propose is an idea that I hope that people will consider about how I think we can adapt them. Not change them, but just adapt them to, hey, what have we learned in the first 6 years that they've been in place? We've learned that they're working. but we've also learned that they might be capturing too much money. Can I find the balance? And I want to do that because, like I said, I think they're both right. The governor has done a tremendous job leading our state, and he is right that these guardrails are working. My friends on the progressive side are also right when they say that there's needs out there, and I think I can try to find the balance.
By having some small part taken. Now, here, the obvious question is going to be, we're always wondering if any day Wall Street bubble is going to burst, right?
Sure.
AI is driving this huge bubble now.
Sure.
Does your thinking kind of change?
No.
Do you think it's long term that this volatility cap is going to produce enough money that we can revisit the guardrails?
I think the volatility cap is producing money and will continue producing money. That's what the projections show. But you got to remember, Paul, that we have that $3 billion in that rainy day fund. I don't suggest that anybody think about touching that. I think that'd be a big mistake because we've lived through the last couple of years in this country where we almost had a recession. And if we had a recession, we'd be back to doing what we did in the Malloy years of decimating the social service net with cuts. Well, we wouldn't have to do that if we have that $3 billion because that's enough money that Moody's and other people say we could weather the storm. So I don't want to touch that, but I think we will continue to see that money come in over the top that we can pay down that debt. But if we free up a little bit of it and find a better balance, again, still tilted towards paying down that debt, but still freeing up some more money, I think it's a good thing.
When do you plan to propose that?
I don't know. Some point in the next few months. We're doing our due diligence to run it by a lot of smart
being
people.
your office?
Yeah. We've got some really smart people in our office that came up with this. We have been working and meeting with people and just different stakeholders and trying to get some feedback on it. And I think when it's ready, we'll release it. And I hope the legislature will consider it next year.
State Comptroller Sean Scanlon, I'm sorry that so much this is a bit of healthcare, but I did want to ask you about this agreement you signed with CVS CareMart.
Yeah.
They're the pharmacy benefit manager for the state health plan.
Yeah.
And you leveraged our large group of people in that plan, to get them to cut the rate?
Yeah. So, starting with Kevin Lembo, my predecessor, he got a really good deal to make that arrangement between us and CVS more transparent, meaning that they have to tell us what they're paying for fees and what they're getting for manufacturer rebates and all those kind of things. It saves our plan members money. It saves the state money. And we're going to save about $30 million just with this deal alone. And I want to continue.
But the deal just means they give you more information?
Yeah, but more information is power. And if I know what they're doing and what they're sort of getting reimbursed by the pharmaceutical industry, I can be more sort of holding their feet to the fire to save us money on our drug costs, and I'm glad that we've done that.
And is this thing Tyson? Did you follow that? They're the first Fortune 100 company to bag CVS for this because they said they actually got more. They're getting promises of more transparency from competitors who are coming up against us, a startup, PBM Rightway.
I didn't see that. No.
So they're using that same argument that transparency cut the costs, and but CVS has 33% of the covered lives in the country.
Yeah.
So next year you might be coming back and saying we're
well, it's a 3-year contract, but we'll see.
So before I let you go, tell me about the election. You were co-chair of Biden in Connecticut.
I was in 2020.
Oh, in 2020.
Yes.
This year, do you have any role in the elections?
No, other than just supporting him and trying to get out there and talk to people about why I think this election is so important, but no formal role just yet.
And any advice?
For him?
And the Democrats in general?
I think we got to earn votes. I mean, I think a lot of people right now are just saying, well, the alternative is so bad. That is 1,000% true. But we have to tell people what we stand for and that what we're fighting for. I think the biggest problem that Democrats face is we suck at explaining what we do and what we have done and what we want to do for people. And we take for granted that everyone knows that we're working on all these great things that nobody knows about. And then we get mad when people don't vote for us because they're like, oh, you should have known about these things. That's such a arrogant, entitled way to think about things. We got to go out and actually tell people what we've done, why we want to continue working for them, and what our plan for the future is. Donald Trump has no plan for the future. All he has a plan for is grievances, things that happened in the past, personal retributions, and relitigating things that we've already overcome in this country. We got to be focused on the future. He's focused on the past.
Now, I noticed that since day one, you focused a lot on trying to communicate. You had an Instagram feed every month about the Comptroller. What have you learned in your first 2 years here about communication? Has your thinking evolved at the best way? Because you have a big challenge. People don't pay attention to Comptroller, even though it's so important.
Well, people don't pay attention to anything, right? I was listening to a podcast. Ted Sarandos from Netflix was on this podcast in the New York Times called The Interview. And he was talking about how at one point, Netflix is the biggest streamer out there, but they are still only about 30% of what people are watching because there's YouTube, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, there's all these things that compete for people's attention. So even this behemoth of Netflix is still competing to get your eyes to pay attention to something. So imagine what it's like to be the comptroller, trying to get people to care. But I think posting authentic content is really important. I still do a lot of the tweets and social media posts myself, which I think is important. And I don't have a world record-breaking audience, but I think the people who do follow us see authentic comment that really is reflective of me.
And metrics have you thought about that at all? A lot of the industry is rethinking metrics. That's not the total number of people you get, but how engaged they are, given how many bots are out there anyway.
Yeah, I think that's right. And listen, it's not going to be overnight. And I think also people don't always just like your stuff, but they still see it.
Okay, and last question was there was a striker pay fund that was suggested $3 million.
Yeah.
For if you go on strike for 2 weeks, the state gives you some pay.
Yeah.
It was done at the last minute. Lamont has vetoed it already, or he's gonna.
He said he has. I don't know if he has.
You would support it, correct?
Well, I was okay with it coming to me.
You were going to administer it.
Because I like to solve problems, and I look at this like the volatility cap. Can I get two sides in the room of people who might not agree on their own, but can I work my magic and see what I can do? And I was prepared to do that, but it looks like the governor's going to veto it.
You going to come up next year? Any new thoughts? Or that's not your game?
No. I still will probably be involved in this, and I've said to both sides, I still, even though I won't be doing it at the behest of the law, I'm still happy to do it.
All right. Well, I was happy that you stopped by before your hamburger here, Sean Scanlon, Comptroller.
Do you eat the hamburgers?
I'm a vegan.
Okay. So just the lettuce and tomato?
Yeah. I did have a Louis in 1981 before I went vegetarian.
Okay.
That was pretty good.
All right. Well,
didn't need the ketchup, but best of luck with that.
Thanks. Good to see you,
Sean,
Paul.
it's always great to see you, and thanks for coming in. Thanks to Harry Drost at the controls. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night at WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.